Whether you call it football or soccer, it's a big business around the world, but at least one expert says the industry can do a lot better. Stefan Szymansky is a professor of sports management at the University of Michigan and also co-author of the book Soccernomics. He explains what it means.
Really, it's about understanding the relationship between the success of soccer clubs on the field and their financial backing and the financial relationships which underpin it. And they're really very simple. Essentially, most football fans probably understand this, that the more you spend, the better your team tends to do. That's because there's a market for players. We really know what players are worth pretty much, and you get what you pay for.
I think most of us could agree on that. Let me read you a quote from the book. Soccer is not only a small business, it's also a bad one. Anyone who spends any time inside a soccer organization discovers that it's just oil, part of the oil business. Stupidity is part of the soccer business. What do you mean by that?
The point of that quote is to say that historically, football clubs have attracted people who seem to have a very sound history in management until they get into sport, and then they seem to go crazy and they seem to do things that they would never have done in their ordinary business life. And part of the way to understand it is that really most businessmen, when they get into running football clubs, they say, well, it's a completely different experience. They're not used to the public profile that they get. And that leads them under the pressure of the fans to make investments which really are way too risky and all too often actually end up in financial disaster.
I want to ask you a little bit more about what's happening in Asia, China and India and Japan and South Korea. All these countries, they love football and they all want to have the best football team. What can they do? What advice would you give those teams if they want to improve their quality of play? Should they develop their own talent or should they go outside of their borders and essentially hire expert talent?
So, for example, in Korea, the K-League, as it's called, really only generates about 10,000 fans a game. In Japan, maybe 15,000, maybe 20,000 sometimes, but they're still relatively small when you think that in Europe, the top clubs are selling out 50, 60,000 every week. So it's really going to take, ultimately, the kind of level of support of following of their domestic games, rather than always looking to the Champions League or the Premier League to get for the football that they like to watch.